दोस्तों, आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस के बारे में, जिनको शॉर्ट में जीएचजी भी कहा जाता है। हम यहाँ पे इस वीडियो में ग्रीन हाउस गैस के क्या क्या सोर्सेज हैं, किन किन सोर्स से ग्रीन हाउस गैस का इमिशन होता है, उनके सिंक क्या है। सिंक मतलब कौन कौन से सिस्टम्स हैं जो ग्रीन हाउस गैसेज को एब्जॉर्ब करते हैं, उनके इमिशन मैकेनिज्म क्या है, सोयल से डिफरेंट ग्रीन हाउस गैसेज का इमिशन कैसे होता है, साथ ही हम उनके सैंपलिंग तथा उनका एनालिसिस कैसे किया जाता है, इन सभी के बारे में इस वीडियो में आज विस्तार से डिस्कस करेंगे। सो व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय ग्रीन हाउस गैस? ग्रीन हाउस गैसेज क्या होती हैं? सो ग्रीन हाउस गैसेज आर द गैसेज that are present in the atmosphere. Okay, and these gases are originated by the natural as well as anthropogenic sources. Okay, so the greenhouse gases are emitted from the natural sources as well as anthropogenic sources. So these gases absorb the emitted radiation at specific wavelength within a spectrum of infrared radiation that is emitted by the Earth's surface, atmosphere, and from the cloud surface. So these gases known as greenhouse gases. Okay, when the sun radiation reflected back from the Earth's surface, so these reflected radiation known as long wave radiations. So these long wave infrared radiations absorbed by these greenhouse gases by the different gases, and these the gases that absorbing these infrared radiation known as greenhouse gases. Okay, so due to and this effect, or we can say this phenomena known as greenhouse effect. So due to the greenhouse effect, the temperature of Earth increase. When the temperature increase, this phenomena known as global warming. Because these gases trap the infrared radiations. Due to the absorbing of infrared radiations, the temperature of Earth's surface increase. So the carbon dioxide is the main greenhouse gases present in the atmospheres, and the anthropogenic, or we can say the human activities, are major sources of the CO2 emission in the atmosphere. There are many greenhouse gases like the water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, and ozone present in the atmospheres. Suppose in the Earth's atmosphere there is no greenhouse gases present in the Earth atmosphere. So the temperature of Earth's surface, or average temperature of Earth, reduce up to minus 18 degrees centigrade. Okay, so we can say without greenhouse effect, the temperature of Earth reduced by 32 degrees centigrade. 32 means it decreased from 40 degrees centigrade to minus 18 degree centigrade. So there is the difference of 32 degrees centigrade. So in many exams, this type question come. What happened when there is no greenhouse gas in the Earth atmosphere? So what will be the temperature? So minus 18 degrees centigrade, and uh, at what amount the temperature is decreased? So, but 30, 32 degrees centigrade temperature decrease in the absence of greenhouse gases. So these are the greenhouse gases, okay, like CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbon, perfluorocarbon, sulfur hexafluoride, nitrogen trifluoride. So these are some potential greenhouse gases present in the Earth's atmosphere. These are the lifetime of these gases. For the CO2, its lifetime, or we can say the residence time in the atmosphere, ranging from 50 to 200 years. For methane, 12.4 years. For nitrous oxide, 121 years. For hydrofluorocarbon, 264. So here you can see the perfluorocarbons having the highest residence time in the atmosphere. So these gases, or we can say perfluorocarbons, are more having more effect over a long period of time as compared to other gases. The second column is related to the global warming potential. And here we are given the global warming potential on the 100-year basis. Okay. It can be calculated on the 50-year basis, 100-year basis, or 120-year basis. We can calculate according to our requirement. Okay. So when we see on the 100-year basis, here you can see the global warming potential of CO2 is the one, and this is the reference point. As compared to the CO2, the global warming potential of methane is that it was variable according to a different report published by the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So 21, 25, and 28. So now you can consider 25 is the global warming potential of the methane. For nitrous oxide is 298. For hydrofluorocarbon 11,700. For perfluorocarbon is 9,200, and for sulfur hexafluoride it is the highest one, 23,500. So we can say the sulfur hexafluoride having the highest global warming potential among all the greenhouse gases. So this is a very common question in the exams. Now the radiative forcing. So when we see the radiative forcing is the, it is now watt per meter square. This is the unit of radiative forcing, watt per meter square. So here you can see the radiative forcing is maximum in the case of carbon dioxide, 2.16 watt per meter square. Okay, then we see the pre-industrial concentration. When the industrial era or industrial revolution started, before industrial revolution, there was very limited concentration of these greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And this is the present scenario or present concentration of greenhouse gases. So you can compare both the gases, or you can even though calculate the how much time they increase as compared to the pre-industrial concentration. Okay, so presently the CO2 is 419 or 420 ppm in atmosphere. The methane concentration is 1.9 ppm. Methane concentration is 0.334 ppm. The SF6 concentration is 10.63 ppt part per thousand. And the nitrogen trifluoride concentration is 0.86 ppt. Okay, so these six or seven are the most potential greenhouse gases present in the atmosphere. Besides these gases, there are other greenhouse gases are also present in the atmosphere, such as here you can see water vapor, ozone, okay, carbon perfluorocarbon, tetrachlorocarbon, okay, these are the chlorofluoro 11, 12, 13. So these are the other greenhouse gases, okay, present in the atmosphere. Now the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere includes like water, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, ozone, chlorofluorocarbon, and sulfur hexafluoride. These are the most prominent oxygen greenhouse gases present in the atmosphere. But out of these, water and ozone are generally not considered or not included in the category of greenhouse gases, most in potential greenhouse gases, because these having very short residence time in the atmosphere. That's why they does not having the much effect. So that's why generally they are excluded from the list of the greenhouse gases. Then after other gases like nitrogen, oxygen, argon, helium, neon, hydrogen, and carbon monoxide present in the atmosphere, but they are not greenhouse gases. So why they are not greenhouse gases, we will discuss in the coming slides. So why are these gases are not greenhouse gases? Okay. So the first reason is, so this is the first reason, because of the symmetry of molecules. Okay, so let us, we will take the example of ozone and water. So we know ozone, no, sorry, oxygen. Oxygen not a greenhouse gases, but water is a greenhouse gas. So the first reason is because the molecule of oxygen, O there is a bond in between oxygen and oxygen. So there is a symmetric structure. We can equally divided these structure. But when we see the water structure, this is not symmetric structure. So that's why these oxygen is not a greenhouse gas, but water is a greenhouse gas. Now, CO2, why CO2 is a greenhouse? The CO2 having the symmetric structure, but CO2 is a greenhouse gas. Why? So here you see the structure of CO2. This is the structure of CO2. It looking symmetry. When we divide, we can symmetrically divided the structure of CO2. It is a symmetric structure, but still it is a greenhouse gas. Why? So because when the CO2 molecule absorbing the infrared radiation, suppose this is the incidence of infrared radiations, so there is increase or stretch in the bond in between the carbon and oxygen. So there is not equal stretching in the bond between the carbon and oxygen. Suppose this is the structure of CO2 when there the incidence of infrared radiation on the both the bonds. So here you can see there is more stretching in one bond and there is less stretching in one bond. So the symmetric structure is disturbed due to the absorption of the infrared radiation. That's why CO2 considered as a greenhouse gas. Okay, here you can see there is a this is the incidence of infrared radiation. Due to the incidence of infrared radiation, there is uneven stretching in the bond. So this is the longer stretching and there is the less stretching. So that's why there is unequal structure, asymmetric structure formation take place. That's why CO2 is considered as a greenhouse gas. Here we see a gas molecule. Suppose there is a nitrogen. This is nitrogen molecule. It is come in the category of greenhouse gas when there is change in the bond length, change in the bond length of between the atoms, or there we can say there is a stretching due to the absorption of infrared radiation. In that case it come under the category of greenhouse gas. Suppose this molecule absorbing the greenhouse gases but there is no stretching, so this molecule is not considered as a greenhouse gas. But the symmetry of other gases change. So there are many other gases like uh, you can see hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So these are having two molecules in their structures. So when there is incidence of infrared radiation, so there is no change in their actual structure. There may be stretching, but there is symmetricity in the molecule still remains. That's why they are not considered as a greenhouse gases. Okay. And the second reason regarding these gases is that there is no dipole moment in these gases like hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Due to diatomic molecular structure, they do not have the dipole moment effects. So that's why they are not absorbing the infrared radiation, and the infrared radiation direct cross the bond between these molecules. That's why there is no change in their symmetricity and they are not absorbing any infrared radiations. So that's why they are not considered as a greenhouse gas. The next one is some other gases like helium, argon, and neon. They are single atom gases. So that's why there is no bonding, there is no change in their symmetricity due to the incidence of infrared radiation. That's why these single atom gases are not act as a greenhouse gases. So what happened with the water? So this is the symmetric structure of water like CO2. When there is the incidence of the infrared radiation, there is unequal stretching in between the bonds, and this unequal stretching creates the asymmetricity in the water molecules. That's why water is considered as a greenhouse gas, but the residence time of water in atmosphere is very low. That's why it is not included in the category of potential greenhouse gases. So generally the global warming potential of gases depend on two things. The first one is the absorption of infrared radiations. Okay, when when there is the incidence of infrared radiation on these gases, so there is the uneven stretching, or there is a having the different absorbing capacity. So that's why these gases are considered as a greenhouse gases, because these gases having the somewhat more capacity to absorbing the infrared radiations. The second one is their residence time in the atmosphere. So the gases having the more residence time, they stay long in the stay more time in the atmosphere. Okay. So they are creating the more warming effect as compared to other gases. So these two factors are responsible for the global warming potential. नाउ द ग्रीन हाउस गैस मॉनिटरिंग, यहाँ पे हम देखेंगे कि ग्रीन हाउस गैसेस की मॉनिटरिंग कब से और कहाँ स्टार्ट हुई. So first of all, the monitoring of the carbon dioxide, atmospheric carbon dioxide was started in 1957. आप इस ईयर को याद रखिए, ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट ईयर है, कभी एग्जाम में इसके बारे में कई बार क्वेश्चन आता है. द मेजरमेंट ऑफ द atmospheric CO2 started in which year and where? So in 1957, the measurement of atmospheric CO2 was started at Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii, and this is situated in the USA, US. Okay, the Mauna Loa Observatory in the Hawaii, and this observatory is operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. This is a organization in the USA, and this is taking care of the this observatory, Mauna Loa Observatory in the Hawaii. So by the December 21st, the amount of CO2 in atmosphere increased by 50% as compared to the industrial revolution. So क्या दिसंबर 2021 में CO2 की कंसंट्रेशन वो 50% इंक्रीज हो गई, जो कंसंट्रेशन इंडस्ट्रियल रिवॉल्यूशन से पहले थी उस कंसंट्रेशन का 50% इंक्रीज हो गई. So Mauna Loa, generally Mauna Loa is a active volcano, largest active volcano in the world, and this observatory is situated near the or in the Mauna Loa. So in 1958, the CO2 observation was started by Charles David Killing at this weather station. Charles David Killing. Okay. So this is the picture of this Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. So Charles Killing measured the variations in the CO2. Okay. So I already told that Charles Killing made the curves between the time or among the time and CO2 concentration. So these curve are known as the Killing curves. Okay. So the Charles David Killing, it was a researcher from the Sripas Institute of Oceanography at San Diego. Okay. So it was not the researcher of the NOAA. It is researcher from the separate institute, and it was the first person who measured the take the regular measurement of atmospheric concentration in the Antarctica at the Mauna Loa Observatory in the Hawaii. But this observatory was situated on the active volcano site. So in 2022, on the November 29th, so there was a volcano. So due to the volcano, the measurement was shifted in the nearby observatory, and that the name of that observatory was the Mauna Kea, Mauna Kea Observatory. So this is the picture of this observatory, Mauna Kea Observatory, and it was 21 mile away from this Mauna Loa Observatory. So currently the observations of CO2 is recording at this observatory, Mauna Kea Observatory. Now the killing curves. Okay, so these are the curve I already told you in between the CO2 concentration and time period. So the killing continuously recorded the CO2 concentration since 1957. Okay, so the CO2 concentration was measured by a instrument that is known as infrared spectrophotometer. Okay, infrared spectrophotometer, and this instrument is also known as non-dispersive infrared sensor or capnograph. So this is the name of instrument used for the CO2 measurement at this or at these observatories. So the Charles David Killing was died in 2005. So after the death of this, after death of Killing, the responsibility of CO2 recording was given to her son, and the name of her son was is the Rap Killing. Okay, the Rap Killing is now continuously measuring the CO2 concentration at these stations. Now the CO2, carbon dioxide. So now the what are the sources of CO2? Here we discuss what are the sources and what is the sink for the CO2. So both natural as well as anthropogenic. Anthropogenic means the human related, or we can say induced, or we can say man-made sources. So anthropogenic, the natural sources of CO2 are the decomposition process, ocean, that is the biggest source of CO2, plant and animal respiration, microbial activities, volcanoes, forest fire, and withering of carbonate rocks. So these are the natural sources, and the anthropogenic sources are industries, power generation, or we can say thermal power plants, cement production, deforestation, burning of fossil fuels, transportation, machineries, agricultural operations, and land use change process is related to the CO2 emission. Now the sink for CO2. So sink means what systems are absorbing the CO2, or we can say removing the CO2 from atmosphere. So the ocean absorbing the CO2, soil and plants, these are known as a sink for the CO2. Now the mechanism of CO2 emission from the soil. In this video, we discuss about the mechanism of GHG emission from the soils only. Okay. So this is the structure of the CO2, and there the bond length between the C and C is the 116.3 picometer. So the carbon dioxide is mainly emitted from the soil metabolic processes that is responsible for the CO2 emission from the soil. So these processes include the microbial respiration, root respiration, these are the respiration by the plant roots, faunal respiration, okay, chemical oxidation of the carbonaceous compound. So these are the major source of the CO2 emission from the soil. The release of CO2 from soil takes place by the bacteria, fungi, algae, and protozoan respiration. The tropical soils show higher emission rate as compared to the temperate region, because the temperate tropical soils having the high temperature means higher microbial activity, higher decomposition of organic matter. That's why there is the more emission of the CO2 as compared to the temperate region soil. Okay. The carbon dioxide concentration in soil much higher. So in the soil, CO2 concentration is much higher than the atmospheric CO2 concentration. because there is a continuous CO2 generation due to the biological process in the soil. So here you can, this is the level of CO2 in the soil air, 11,000 ppm, and this is the level of CO2 in the air, 420 ppm. Okay, so here you can see the a large or big difference in between the CO2 concentration in the soil air and atmospheric air. Under the waterlogged conditions, or we can say the soil that is waterlogged, the CO2 level is ranging from 10,000 to 30,000 ppm. So the variability in soil water content probably one of the most affecting factors for the CO2 emission from the soil. Now, what are the different sources and sink for the methane? We have discussed about the CO2. Now we will discuss about the methane. So both the natural and anthropogenic sources are responsible for the methane emissions. So what are the natural sources? The wetlands, other inland water bodies, offshore and onshore geological sources, termites, Dimak is also responsible for CO2 emission, the wild animals. In animals, the mainly the ruminants, there is anaerobic digestion of the organic matter or whatever they eating or fodder, that is released as methane from their guts. Then after oceanic sources, terrestrial permafrost and hydrates and vegetations in the through the respirations. So these are the natural sources. Then after the anthropogenic sources, the fossil fuel production and use, coal mining, oil and natural gas, agricultural waste sector like livestock, rice cultivation and waste management. Then after biomass and biofuel burning. So these are the anthropogenic sources of the methane emission. Now the sink for methane. So atmosphere is also act as a sink for the methane. So how it act? What is the process? Generally the OH radical, okay, known as hydroxyl radical, is known responsible for the methane degradation in the atmosphere. So whatever methane emitted in the atmosphere, it react with the OH radical and it degraded. So that's why atmosphere act as a sink. That's why the hydroxyl radical is known as a chemical scavenger. Chemical scavenger. Okay. In the troposphere, or we can say it is a known as a atmospheric detergent for the methane removal. And the second source is the soil. So soil is a natural sink in the soil due to the methanotropic process. The methanotropes consume the methane. These are the bacteria that consume the methane in the soil. Now this is the global sources or sink budget of the atmospheric methane. So here you can see these are the natural sources like the wetland, termite, ocean, other, and this is the total. This is the range of methane emission from 110 to 210 tegagram per year, and this is the average value of the methane emission from the natural sources. When we see in the case of anthropogenic sources like fossil fuel burning, cattle, rice cultivation, biomass burning, landfills, animal waste, and domestic sewage. So the total methane emission from the anthropogenic sources is ranging from 300 to 450 tegagram per year. Okay, and this is the average value. So that there is the total sink. Sink is ranging from 430 to 600 tegagram per year. So this is the atmospheric increase, 35 to 40 tegagram per year. This is the atmospheric increase of the methane concentration per year. Okay. So जितना भी when we see the average value, this is the 375, and this is the value of sink value. Okay, average sink value for the methane. Now the methane emission and transfer of methane from soil to atmosphere. सो यहाँ हम देखेंगे कि राइस के फील्ड से मीथेन का इमिशन कैसे होता है. सो जनरली इन द राइस फील्ड इज ए लो लैंड फील्ड. ओके, लो लैंड फील्ड का मतलब होता है द सोयल और द फील्ड इज सबमर्ज विद द water. There is a continuously stagnant condition of the water. Water is continuously stagnant, is ranging from, okay, in the rice field. So generally the three processes are responsible for the methane transfer or emission from the rice field. First one is the vascular transport. More than 90% methane emission take place through this process. Then second one is the evolution, 5 to 10%, and third one is the diffusion, less than 1% is through the vascular transport. Okay, so here you can see this is the rice plant. Okay, in rice plant, in the rice stem, there are arranchyma tissue. Okay, and these arranchyma tissue provide the hollow path for the emission of the methane. So whatever plant CO2 methane present in the rhizosphere, that rhizosphere is through the arranchyma tissue they emitted in the atmosphere. Okay, so this process is known as vascular transport. Second process is the ebullition. Ebullition means some methane trapped in the soil. Okay, in the soil layers or in the soil during the field preparation, or the earlier methane is captured in between the soil layers. So these soil slowly with time is released in the form of the bubbles. Okay, from these layers. So this process is known as ebullition. And third process is diffusion. The mainly diffusion process is related to depend on the concentration variation. Suppose there is at one location there is more concentration of methane. So due to the diffusion, the methane is emitted from higher concentration to low concentration. So likewise, these three processes responsible for methane emission from the rice field. So first one is the vascular transport. Okay, so these are the holes that are responsible for methane emissions from the rice field. Okay, these is known as arranchyma tissue. So the arranchyma in aquatic plant is prevalent in the root cortex, and this develop extensively in the rhizomes and stems. Continue a lower porosity through the shoot base. So the plant with arranchyma possess the porous tissue and allow the direct travel of the gases from the plant root to the atmosphere. So these arranchyma tissue responsible for methane emission. The second one process is the ebullition. So this when the in the gas emission in the form of the bubbles. So here you can show the this is the example of CO2 and methane. This is the CO2 that is entered below the oceans in the rocks or in the water. So these with the time being this is slowly released in the form of bubbles. Okay. So the bubbles come in the packets of the methane. So this process known as the ebullition. So the methane ebullition is important during the early stage of the flooding. Okay, when the rice plant is small, whereas the vascular transport become more important during the plant growth, because when plant is properly matured, so that stage there is the more amount of the parenchyma, so the vascular transport process is more dominant during the when the plant is mature, and the ebullition process is more dominant during the early stage, because when we fill the water in the field, that time it the ebullition process started. Then after diffusion, so the diffusion of gases in water is 10 to power 4 times slower as compared to the air, and the exchange of gases almost stop when soil is completely waterlogged or submerged. So less than 1% of methane emission take place through the diffusion, and it is mainly the concentration depend. Now the mechanism of methane emission. What is the chemical processes take place for the methane production in the soil? So mainly the biological formation of methane by the bacteria the process known as methanogenesis and the bacteria known as methanogens. This is generally anaerobic decomposition. In anaerobic decomposition means when the oxygen is absent. Suppose in the field of rice, we fill the water. When we fill the water, there is no air in the soil, or we can say air is removed by the water. So anaerobic condition develop, and these anaerobic condition is the favorable for the methanogens, and the methanogens degrade the organic matter and they produce the methane. Okay. So the methane produced by the reduction of the soil organic carbon under anaerobic conditions, when the soil redox potential drop below minus 150 microvolt, minus 150 microvolt. So the potential when decrease or below minus 150 microvolt, in that case the methane emission started. Under oxidized conditions, suppose there is the oxygen is present, the decomposition of organic matter release the CO2 and water. So there is no methane emission, or we can say very minute or very trace amount of the methane emitted from the soil. But in the anaerobic condition or in the wetland rice fields, due to anaerobic condition, the methane emission take place. So these are the reactions that are responsible for the drop in the redox potential in the soil, and they activate the methanogenesis process. So here you can see these organic matter react with the water, oxygen, and they produce the CO2 and water. In this case, you can see this is the redox potential value. When the organic matter react with the nitrate, they produce the bicarbonate and CO2 and water, and you see that this is the redox potential. Likewise, they react from the several substrate. Or here you can see when it started to react with the ferrous hydroxide, here you can see that it is drop almost minus 114, means it reduced below 150 microvolt. In that condition, the methane production started. Here you see when it is lower, minus 58, in that condition, you can see this is the methane emission generation started from the soil. Under the anaerobic or reduced conditions, so there is no oxygen, so that's why they are reduced condition. The methanogens produce methane through the reduction of carbon dioxide by hydrogen. Okay, under the anaerobic condition or reduced condition, the methane is produced by the reduction of hydrogen into the reduction of the carbon dioxide by the hydrogen. Okay, so this process is known as hydrogenotropic pathway. Okay, when the CO2 and hydrogen react and form the methane, this process known as hydrogenotropic pathway. Or when the methane emission take place by the fermentation of acetate to in the methane and carbon dioxide, this process known as acetoclastic pathway. So there are two pathway, hydrogenotropic and acetoclastic. Hydrogeno means the CO2 and hydrogen react and produce the methane, and when the acetate acetate produce the methane, this process known as acetoclastic pathway. So in nature, the acetoclastic pathway account two-thirds of the methane emission. So we can say the acetoclastic process is more dominant in the soil as compared to the hydrogenotropic pathway. Now the reactions that are responsible for the methane emissions in soil are, first one is the reduction of CO2 by the hydrogen through the chemoautotrope methanogen. So this is the reaction. This is a hydrogenotropic pathway. Then after the these acids act as a substrate for the methane emission. So here you can the methogen use these acids and carbon monoxide for the methane generations. And the third process in which the alcohol, the methylotropic bacteria, they using the alcohol group or like methanol, acetate and trimethylamine. This alcohol, acetate and trimethylamine as a substrate for the methane emission. So these are the different type of reactions take place for the methane emission in the soil. Now the methane consumption, as we know, the soil is also at a methane sink, means soil is also absorbing or degrade the methane. So this is a aerobic process. In the aerobic conditions, soil act as a sink for the methane, and this process known as a methanotropic process. And methanotrope bacteria act responsible for the methane consumptions. So here you can see this is a reaction of methane consumption. Here you can see methane is converted into the acetate. So here you can see the methane is converted into the aldehyde, acetaldehyde, formaldehyde, and the formaldehyde converted into the formate. This is the acid, formic acid, and this formic acid is converted finally into the carbon dioxide. So this is the reaction how the methane is converted into the CO2. Okay, and another reaction is the methane is react with the sulfate and converted into the bicarbonate. And likewise, through this process is also the methane is removed from the atmosphere. So up to now, we have covered the source and sink or reactions of the CO2 and methane. Now we discuss about the nitrous oxide sources and sink in the atmosphere. So both natural sources as well as anthropogenic sources are responsible for the nitrous oxide emission. So natural sources are oceans, soil under natural vegetation and atmospheric reactions are responsible for the NO2 emissions. The anthropogenic sources are industrial process, power generation, burning, transport, agricultural operation, fertilizer application, human sewage, atmospheric depositions. Now the sink of N2O atmosphere, photolysis of in the stratosphere and soil removal. So these three are reactions or sources act as a sink for the nitrous oxide. Now the global sources and sink potential of different sources. So here you can see the natural sources like ocean emitting from 1.4 to 2.6 decagram per year and to emission. The tropical soil also classified into the wet forest and dry forest. The temperate soil like forest, grassland, cultivated soil, biomass burning, stationary combustion, mobile source, adipic acid production, nitric acid production. So total is 5.2 to 17 decagram per year and to emitted from the soil or different sources, not soil. Then after sink, the photolysis reduce from 7 to 3 decagram. The removal of from soil, it is not estimated, and atmospheric increase is 3 to 4.5 decagram per year. So this is a budget, source sink budget of the nitrous oxide emission in atmosphere. Now the mechanism of nitrous oxide formation in the soil. Okay, so the emission of nitrous oxide is a integral part, or we can say part of the nitrogen transformation process, or we can say nitrogen cycle. So there are different biological processes are responsible, like denitrification, nitrification, dissimilatory nitrate reduction, assimilatory nitrate reduction, as well as abiological reactions like chemodenitrifications are responsible for nitrous oxide emission from the soil. So these are the different processes responsible for the nitrous oxide emission from the soil. So more than 99% nitrous oxide is emitted from by the process of denitrification and nitrification. These are most abundant process for the NO emission, and the remaining process is contributed less than 1%. So the nitrification contribute to nitrous oxide emission through the biological oxidation of ammonia into nitrate following the ammonium fertilizer or ammonia forming fertilizer addition in the aerobic condition. So when the ammonia is converted into the nitrate, there is a intermediate product. So the ammonia is converted into the nitrate, and these nitrate either used by the plants or it is leach out or it is emitted in the atmosphere. The denitrification occur when the conditions are anaerobic. Okay, so the microbial demand for oxygen exceed by the diffusion mediated supply. This may occur when their oxygen diffusion is impeded by the water. Okay, when there is more water, the oxygen diffusion is stopped. Okay, or it is reduced by the water. So denitrification in soil also consume the nitrous oxide through the reduction of nitrous oxide into the nitrogen. So in denitrification, when the anaerobic condition, it is also converted into the nitrogen. Okay. So this is very, very important line. The denitrification process act both as a source and sink for the nitrous oxide, because the denitrification process is responsible for the nitrous oxide emission as well as consumption of nitrous oxide in the under the anaerobic conditions. So this is very important. Denitrification act as a source and sink for the nitrous oxide. Now the chemical formation of nitrous oxide. Okay, the nitrous oxide also formed by the chemical reactions like the decomposition when the hydroxylamine NH2OH react with the nitric acid. They form the nitrous oxide and water. So now we discuss about the how we measure, how we take the samples of different type of the gases, greenhouse gases from the field measurement. Okay, from the agriculture soils, the emissions of greenhouse gases take place. So how we measure, how we take the samples of these greenhouse gases. Okay, so generally there are three processes or three approaches. The first one is the closed chamber method. Okay, so this is the figure of closed chamber method we will discuss. In this is a short time method for maximum up to 2 hours. We use this method for the greenhouse gas measurement. Then after second is the open chamber method. Okay, in this method the air is drawn or forcefully through the collection system. Okay, so there are permanent chamber. Through these chambers the air is sucked by the up to the measurement up to the sensor. Okay, so these generally these the open chamber methods are not widely used because they are having the large setup. That's why they are not as popular as the closed chamber methods are popular among the researchers. The third one is the micrometeorological methods. Okay, so these methods measure the vertical concentration gradients, okay, of the greenhouse gases like the AD covariance tower is generally used, or other sensors are used for the measurement of the vertical movement of the greenhouse gases in the field. So among these three approaches, the closed chamber method is widely used. So here we are going to discuss about the closed chamber methods. So here you can see this is a closed chamber. Okay, this is the closed chamber made up of the this closed chamber is made up of the plastic, that's our acrylic sheet, and at the bottom there is this is known as a channel, and this channel is mainly made up of the aluminium, steel, or iron. Okay, so these two things are used for the sampling of the GHG. Okay, so there are many components are attached with this chamber. Okay, the first one is the battery operated fan. So here is a fan. We installed a fan at the top of the this chamber box, and these fan are used for the homogeneous, because over the period of time during the measurement, due to the temperature gradient or temperature variation, There is no uniform concentration of the gases in the chamber, so we homogenize by mixing these gases in the chamber. Second one is the thermometer. We use the thermometer to measure the inside temperature of the box. Then we use the three-way stopcock, okay, for the sampling of the greenhouse gases. Then after we using the 50 ml syringe and hypodermic needle for the collection of sample. Okay. The head space volume inside the box is recorded. So this head space volume we record for the calculation of the greenhouse gases. Okay. So first of all, we fix the channel over the soil. Okay, here we fix the channel over the soil, then we fill the water and we place this chamber on this chamber, and we take the reading. We take first reading after placing the chamber on the channel, that is known as zero reading, or we can say 0 hour reading. Second reading, according to our experiment, we take the different reading, like after 30-minute reading, after 1 hour reading, and maximum it is recommended that these chamber methods should use up to 2 hours only. After there is changes in the micrometeorology or due to the temperature, there is the change in the emission of the different greenhouse gases from the soil. So now here you can see these are the vials. These are known as vials, glass vials used for the collection or storage of the sample. Suppose we are not able to measure the GHG samples same days. In that case, we fill these vials and we store the GHG samples. These are the syringe used for the collection, and this is a three-way valve used for the collection or sampling of the GHG. Now the advantage and disadvantages of this closed chamber method. So what are the advantages? The first one is the very small flux can be measured by using this method. There is no extra equipment required, like there is no electricity required for this method. Second one is there is little disturbance, because we keep the boxes for sampling for a shorter period, for up to 1 hour, so there is little disturbance in the natural conditions of the soil. The chambers are simple and relatively they are inexpensive. The cost is very low as compared to the other methods, and the chamber can be easily installed and removed from the after the sampling. Then what are the limitations? So there the first limitations is the inhibit the normal emission rate. When we keep the chamber for the longer time, it inhibit or change the way emission rate or flux rate of the GHG from the soil. The second one is the closed chamber alter the atmospheric pressure fluctuations. When there is the temperature variation, so there is a pressure variations also exist in the chamber, and that pressure variation is also responsible for the movement of the gases in the box. Third one is the temperature change inside the box. Okay, so these are the three limitations exist with the chamber method. Now the greenhouse gas measurement. So many remote sensing technologies we are also going to use, or other technologies we sensors we use for the measurement of the greenhouse gas. The first one is for the CO2. Here you can see for the CO2 we use the manometry process, infrared gas analyzer, these are the instrument, and titrimetry. So these are the instrument used for the carbon dioxide measurement. Then after for methane, we use the differential absorption lidar system. Then after third one is the N2O. For N2O, we use atmospheric chemistry experiment, the Fourier transform spectrometer ACEFT. This instrument is used for the measurement of the nitrous oxide. Okay. So there are many satellites are used for the measurement of the greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere. Okay. So the greenhouse gas observing satellite known as GeoSat in 2009, it was launched for the CO2 and methane measurement. Then after the orbiting carbon observatory, OCO, OCO2, OCO3, these are the carbon measurement satellite denoted by OCO. Okay, so these are launched in the space for the measurement of the carbon variations in the atmosphere. Then after the Integrated Carbon Observation System, IOCS, established in October 2005 in the Helsinki, Finland. So this system is established in the Helsinki, Finland in 2015. The Tropomi instrument, this is a name of instrument, Tropomi. This is attached with the Sentinel-5 satellite, and this satellite launched in 2007 by the European Space Agency for the measurement of the methane, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, aerosols, and ozone concentration in Earth atmosphere. Okay. Then after the International Methane Emission Observatory was created by the United Nations. So here, in the case of methane, you can see in the case of methane, we use the LIDAR, and full form of LIDAR is the light detection and ranging. Light detection and ranging. So these are some about different satellites that are or other instruments that are used for the greenhouse gas measurement. Now for the stationary, there are many lab-based instruments are using for the measurement of different type of the greenhouse gases. First one is the Fourier transfer infrared spectrophotometer used for the measurement of the carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, chlorofluorocarbon, SF6 and NF3. The gas chromatography with flame ionization detector FID used for the methane measurement. The gas chromatography with TCD detector used for the CO2 and methane determination. The gas chromatography with ECD detector used for the N2O and SF6 determination. The atomic emission detector used for the chlorofluorocarbon atomic emission detector. The non-dispersive infrared detector used for the CO2, methane, N2O and CFCs. And photoacoustic absorption spectroscopy used for the methane, nitrous oxide, chlorofluorocarbon and sulfur hexafluoride. So after sampling, what we do? After sampling, we go for the analysis, and in laboratory, generally we use the gas chromatography for the measurement of the different type of the greenhouse gas. So we use different type of the detector according to our requirement. Okay. So for methane emission, the gas chromatography used with the flame ionization detector for the measurement of the methane. The GC use the electron capture detector ECD detector for nitrous oxide emission, and for CO2 we also use the ECD detector with the GCM. For CO2 measurement we also use the titration method, and we also use the soil respirator. This is a sensor based instrument that directly measure the CO2 flux from the soil. So these are the different methods used for the analysis of the different type of the greenhouse gases in the laboratories. So friends, आज के वीडियो में इतना ही. अगले वीडियो में फिर मिलते हैं. तब तक के लिए नमस्कार.